Welcome to At the Ready podcast, where we gear up men to navigate life's battles with purpose. Join us as we arm ourselves with wisdom, faith, and a community of men prepared to walk this life together. Now let's get ready. On this episode of At the Ready, I sit down with Tim Jones. Tim is a veterinarian in my community, a pillar of the community, a man who exudes what it's like to live and walk the Christian life. He pours back into the community, helps with teaching and coaching sports. He's a disciple-making disciple. Great conversation with Tim today. We talked about several things. We talked about growing up in the shadow. His dad was a doctor, so we talked about growing up in his shadow. We talked about how walking through life, what does that look like? Looking back now and seeing how God made and moved, made a way and moved things in his life to make him the man that he is today. A lot of great life lessons from today's episode, from me and from Tim, in all aspects of life. Family, sports, raising children, marriage, all those things. So great interview with Tim today. You'll definitely want to sit down and listen up as I talk to Tim Jones. Now let's get ready. All right, Tim Jones, welcome to At the Ready podcast. Man, I've had a couple people actually request you as a guest on the show. So you were well sought after, but I got to start with, man, how about those Eagles?
Right.
We're recording this after the Battle of the Birds game, and we were victorious.
Yeah.
We should have wore our Eagle gear.
Yeah, right. I know. 16 years. Yeah, that's
yeah.
what I had plenty of the stuff to wear.
Yeah. I had plenty of it too. We talked a long time before we actually started the show about the game and how cool it was. I was glad to be a part of that and be at the you've got a son that plays on the team. He's a sophomore. My son's a freshman. He's hurt, so he just got to be water boy. But still, it was cool to have sons that were a part of that.
Yeah.
2008 was the last year?
Yeah. You know, and what I thought about the game is, you know, the refs. So here's your little something. I was in the locker room before because I'm kind of a glorified water boy too.
Yeah.
But is the refs come in before the game.
Right.
I've been in there they've never done that. And so I guess they were thinking there was going to be high tension during the game. And there usually are a little chippy and things like that. But, you know, if you think about that game, there's really never any after fights or really fights during. So, I think both teams respect each other. Yeah. And, you know, it was just, I guess, a good part to be on the other side, you know, this time.
Yeah. I will say that about our community, you know, crosstown rivalry and, you know, Mayfield's had our number for a long time, and it was good for us to get a win. But there's a lot of respect between, like, I don't know about Luke, but my son, Evan, I mean, he's got a ton of friends that go to Mayfield. So the respect between the two teams is there. So awesome. So just a little bit of intro to who you are, maybe if people don't know, right? You are Tim Jones is your name. You're the son of a well-known doctor in the area. Your dad, Dr. Jones, was my doctor. Probably from me being a toddler on up, you know, until I got a little bit older. You're a veterinarian in our community, and you do a lot of good things in our community. So we'll get into some of that. But when I started doing this podcast, and a lot of people know, but I wanted to inspire and encourage men. And that looks like a couple of different things to me. There are people who have stories like my friend Lee of they done a lot of bad things for a lot of years, and then maybe God got a hold of them, or for whatever reason they turned their life around. That's an inspiring story. But to me, equally as inspiring of a story is a man who just did the right thing. You know, whether God called them to do it or whether their story's faith inspired or not. But a man who just steps up to the plate, does the right thing, provides for his family, is a pillar of his community, all those things. So I think we can learn and gain a lot from those men equally as much as we can gain the stories of how somebody was going down a bad road and then turned to a good road. So you're one of those men that I feel like, you know, just like my friend Paul, you know, I had Paul Wilkerson on there. He's a great man. I've had several, but you're one of the ones that was on my list. And you come highly requested, too, by some of our fellow Graves Countyans. So I just kind of want to hear your story. And wherever you want to take off, I don't know how far you want to go back, and tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah. So I was actually born at Murray. We moved off for a little bit as Dad was in medical school, but moved back whenever I was in second grade. So I've been in this area for quite some time, and went to Graves County during the years at Graves County. Is I was a football player. I graduated in '96 was when I graduated, but football was a huge passion, and honestly, I had a lot of respect for Graves County and the teachers there. Just so much influence that happened during that time. And during football, though, I can go back on that because it really, at that point, I didn't understand, but looking back, you're able to, teamwork, it's not me,
some of the principles that you learned through the sport.
And even when we come back around to the business career and veterinary career, like I go back to part of the football and how it trained me. My senior year, I was a captain, so at that point in time, they would pick captains, the team pick their captains for that year. And so it was Jody Goatley and Trey Delk and then me. And so with that came responsibilities that we had during the year. We had a decent year. I think we were 7-5, 7-6 that year. So it was a winning year.
What position did you play?
I was we ran wishbone.
Yeah.
So I was a fullback.
Gotcha.
And then I was a tight end as well, which at that point was it was a little different than a tight end, a defensive end. Sorry, it was kind of outside linebacker. You would move up and move back a little bit, but it was good. And kind of the other thing, we went from 3A to 4A between my junior and senior year. And so
playing some bigger schools.
Yeah, and how they ran their offense and things like that. Because my junior year, I think Jody may be able to say a little bit more, but we were pretty close on tackles, Jody and I was on the line and he was linebacker.
Yeah.
Senior year, he got more tackles, but I guess he can get on to me if I'm completely wrong on that. But
he can fact check you later.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then after that, kind of deciding on what I wanted to do. I always had kind of a passion for medicine. I do enjoy medicine. I enjoy kind of the biology thing. Have always enjoyed animals. We had horses, dogs, kind of name it growing up. And, that's what I hear a lot, especially starting out as veterinarians is, I love animals, which you have to have that. There's a little more that goes in with that. But the other thing I will say is that, probably seeing my dad do it and what he went through, and him saying, here's what's going to happen, because this was probably 30 years ago. He was like, government and insurance is going to run what we do.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
So, I guess you could say I went to the dogs, and so I went the route of medicine, but in a different direction as far as vet school.
All right, so let's back up. You're going too fast. Slow down a little bit.
All right.
So in high school, your dad's a practicing doctor.
Correct.
In our hometown. What was that like? Was because your dad's a great guy and he's well known in the community. Did that? How did your raising? Was that like? What was that like? I guess I actually, when I sent you some questions, I might ask. I said, "What was it like growing up with the?" And I said in quotes, "the Jones family name."
Yeah.
What was there some things that were tougher or some extra pressure put on you maybe growing up in that high school age?
And I do think I felt like yes, I was under a microscope.
Yeah.
For the reason is, a lot of people did see my father during the time. Everybody, if they did not go to him, they still knew him.
Yeah.
And they knew him, a lot of them, from a young age, even to him being a doctor. But if you didn't know that, a lot of people went. So, one, I couldn't get away with anything, right? And two is the expectations of, I know your dad, and what are you doing? So I think part of that was a little bit of a struggle whenever you look at other people. But saying that is, I don't know that even at that point in time, there's not really anybody that is harder on me than I am.
Okay.
And so internally speaking, there's things that drive me, and that's internal. But then also the pressures, I would say, of, being that person. Here's your dad. Here's your dad. There was some of that did absolutely come with it, and I did probably fight those demons for a little bit, and because like you said, he is a phenomenal, man, and as you get older and you become a father, you look back and see what your father was and did, and the appreciation I have for him now, maybe not so much at that point, right? But now you look back and say, the direction that I was held in by him, he was a man of faith, very much still is, elder at his church, and a lot of that drove me because I wanted to do the right thing. I didn't always do the right thing. I made sure it was very much a secret when I didn't do the right thing.
Right.
But from that to, the, ability to make grades, again, the standard of, you have to make your grades, you have to be top, so that drive was there. And I think part of that drive come from my father. Now, nobody knows my grandparents.
Yeah.
So, he came from nothing. It wasn't, multiple generation.
Right.
There's very few people that would know my grandparents,
Yeah.
So again, it was
There's some pressure.
It was definitely some pressure.
Yeah. So what I think about is like when I think about your dad and just the name he built in our community is like you take like the mayor's son or a pastor's son. You take those kind of. There's a lot of pressure on that child coming up, and there's not as much grace given usually. Because you are a kid, you're going to make dumb mistakes. I just think about my pastor. He's got 3 boys. And anytime, sometimes they're kids and they do dumb stuff, and you judge them a little more harshly. Like, come on, you're the pastor's son. You know better than that. You should do better than that. It's like, no, they're kids. They're boys. They do dumb stuff. Just like so. In a sense, that's where I was going with this. Did you feel that pressure?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And the pressure can crush you, or it can mold you depending on how your dad handled that. So did he encourage you and say like, hey, we do have a name, we have a reputation in the town. But do your best. Do all these things.
Yeah, and I don't know that he ever really said that.
Oh,
I think that he would come to me and encourage, and he would not hold me at the standard of the name necessarily.
Yeah.
I think he was in his way, but it was more of encouragement of that point. And it definitely you are judged harder in any small thing that you do.
Yeah.
And you're 100% right. How do you deal with that? Mm-hmm. And like you said, you can go one way or the other. Very few, it's right down the middle. And I've seen the people that have said no and went down the wrong way. Yep. Honestly, it probably still frustrates me to this point of having the standard of that, because honestly, now, like I appreciate my dad's shadow. Yeah, I do, and the growing up of what we had and what he gave me, as far as not financially, but mentally and just all of that and guidance and stuff like that. But I'm not sure I don't still fight with that shadow a little bit, and that just and I think that was one of the things that has driven me to be who I am, to do what I do, because I want it to be me and not because of type of thing.
Yeah. So it can be good,
Mm-hmm.
the path that, and I think as men, as fathers, we should carve a path out for our kids. So even your dad, with all good intentions, he's trying to provide what's best for you, his son. Do you have any brothers or sisters?
Two sisters.
Two
well,
sisters.
So one of them passed in a few years ago.
Yeah.
I guess we're 8 years out now. But she passed, and then I do have another younger sister.
Yeah.
Yep.
So for his children, your dad is trying to carve out a path, but sometimes when doing that, that leaves a big shadow.
Yeah.
And then as you coming up, I like how you said, like, I appreciate everything he did for me, but at the same time, I don't want to live in that shadow. So that I can see where you were still driven to carry on the Jones name, but I want to do it in a slightly different area. That's cool. So you said even 30 years ago, your dad's like, hey, this is the direction medicine's going in. We got insurance companies, we got government that's going to dictate what we do, how we can treat our patients, yada, yada, yada. And you decide, okay, I want to stick to medicine, but I'm going with the furries instead, right?
Correct.
All right. Explain, kind of walk us through that path. What did that look like?
So it is it's tough to get into vet school.
Yeah.
There's not a many, and to the point of, we were talking about my father, Dad applied to vet school before he applied to medical school.
No joke.
And they looked at him and laughed. And so he was like, well, I guess I can't do this. I'm going to be, Now, saying that, I don't think, veterinarians are better than human physicians, than doctors. But that being said, it is tough to get in. And I didn't really appreciate that when I first started Murray. My first year was not very good, and it was not because I was partying. It was because I enjoyed the money. And so I was working, skipping classes to do this and do that.
Gotcha.
Between my first and second year, that summer, I had my own tobacco at that point, and I was out by myself suckering tobacco. And if you've ever done it, it's horrendous. It's terrible.
Yep.
It's terrible. And I was sitting there by myself, and I'm like, this is not what I want to do the rest of my life. And so from there, I ended up keeping a 3.85 or better for the rest of the time. So kind of moving forward from that, my junior year, I elected to apply to vet school. They didn't take me, and I was like, that's okay, I'm a year early. My senior year, I applied, and I was like, this feels good, I like where I'm at, this is really good. Well, I was an alternate, which means if somebody drops out, you could get their spot. Well, they don't tell you how many alternates there are, and they don't tell you where you are on the list. So we're like, okay, I did not get the phone call to get in that year. So I'm sitting here going, what's going to happen?
Now what do I do?
And a little bit frustrated. Again, I have at that point worked so hard to get where I am. Well, I was very persistent, and so I stayed in and got my master's at Murray. It was a non-thesis master's, so I could get it done in a year. And then that next year, I got into vet school at Auburn, which worked out phenomenally. As I look back, the classes ahead of me, I would not have been quite as close. I mean, my best friends now that I can call are some of my vet school friends, And so, anyways, it worked out great. God, and we will come back around to this. When you don't see it, and even when things are going good and perceived going good, like we said, my upbringing was amazing. I had amazing parents. School, amazing. What I was able to do during Murray State, amazing. Didn't really even appreciate it. And then I start getting a little frustrated because I'm not getting in when I think I should, and I'm looking at all these things. God has a plan, and He really does. And so getting in that year, I was able to meet one of my best friends who will be coming in this weekend, Labor Day, who's a vet in Birmingham. His family and I are very, very close. And so, again, He has a plan. He really does, even though you don't see it.
So I want to ask you something. And this kept me out of college too. Do you think we do kids a disservice a little bit by letting them taste having money? You said you didn't do so good your first year, not because of partying, because you got that taste of money and what it's like, that freedom a little bit, making your own money. You're able to do your own things. That's what happened to me. Like my dad made me work all throughout high school, and because we didn't have a lot, and he worked second jobs, and so I would usually work those jobs with him, and then I started working when I could drive and all those things. And then when I got the taste of money, and I thought, if I go to college, I'm not going to be able to work as much or make as much money. I think I'll just work, instead. And so it wasn't until my later on in my 30s when I went back to school, which is I wouldn't recommend. It's a lot harder to learn it in your 30s than it is when you're younger. Your brain doesn't seem to absorb it as well. But you think we do kids a disservice sometimes by go ahead and...
Yes. So I think that whenever it is truly money driven, I do.
Yeah.
And, just for me, I was always taught to work. That's one, having a good work ethic. And so how do you balance that with money? My kids, they have chores to do at home that they get a little money for, but they really are not getting paid, and they are supposed to do it.
Yeah.
My son started at a clinic this year. He's getting paid, but he's not getting paid much.
Yeah.
It's not like he's my son, so he's going to get $20 an hour.
Right.
He's starting at the bottom.
Yeah.
So I do think there is part of that, but then also I do think we do kids a disjustice of saying they have to go to college too, because I feel that if you do not have a plan when you go to college, you're wasting money, right? And so I do feel like there's trades that, I can make money here, but if I will take these things and do these things in trades, they're going to make good money.
Yeah.
And I just, when I talk to, because I do talk to a lot of teenagers and things like that, of what you want to do and why do you want to do them, and you have to look to the future, which again, I don't know that I was necessarily ever taught to, or that I can remember. Let's plan for what we are 10 years from now. Let's plan for what we are. And so, whether it's college or whether it's a vocational school, tech program type of thing, I think it's how you come across. And again, the money thing is always tough, isn't it? It's always tough.
Yeah.
And as a kid, you're looking at, that money. But again, I think we all know that it doesn't bring happiness. And that's what I always taught. You need enough to raise your family. You need enough that it's not super hard, but don't let it drive you.
Yeah. As I've gotten older, I'm 38. I'm knocking on 40's door, but my priorities have changed so much. Like in my early 20s, I was all about, I got to make that dollar. I want to live a good life, comfortable life. I want to have. It was for me. It was usually materialistic things. I want the best truck, the nicest house, all those things. And now, as I get older, I could care less about that crap, and I want to do more like traveling and make memories and do those things. And so it's, of course, now me trying to tell my teenager that he's like, "Whatever, Dad.
Right.
I want that nice truck or that." I'm like, son, trust me. In 20 years, you won't care nothing about those kind of things. All right, so you get into vet school at Auburn. What was that like? Was that tough?
Oh, it was tough. It was very tough. It was very tough. So what I typically will tell people is what we would go over in a semester at Murray in a class was done in a week.
Oh, wow.
And so we were tested a ton. It was, now saying that is, I think, it's about work ethic, because I never felt like I had been the smartest person in the room. But I always felt like if put to the test, I can outwork you. I'm not going to stop until I'm passed out.
That's always been me too. Like, I might not be the smartest, but I guarantee you can't outwork me.
And that's where my mind goes. So when I got to vet school, so a little funny story, I got to vet school, and you have to change how you study. Like, studying is a huge difference from undergrad, because you're going through so much material and stuff. My first test, man, I bombed. And I was like, and this is only a half semester course, so it really wasn't worth that much, but you still have to pass it.
Yeah.
I bombed it, and I was like, ooh, I'm in the wrong spot.
Gut check
I'm
time.
in the wrong spot. But saying that is, I brought that back through and brought that up, and to me was about work ethic. Once I got there, is just being able to make it through the material, force yourself to get through all those things.
Mm-hmm.
One of my other friends, he could Saturday and Sundays, he'd be studying and watching football.
Yeah.
All at the same time, and
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I can't do that. And he would only have to go through his notes one time.
Yeah.
And remember everything,
Yeah.
right? And not me. So during that year, it did take a lot of perseverance. It took a lot of just pushing through it, and being able to be persistent in what you do. And with that, I did end up, when I started again, I'm not the smartest person in the room, but was able by the end to graduate with honors. With that, to be able to work through, graduate with honors, phenomenal. Auburn, I paid them a lot of money to go, so I support them very well. But also, it's a totally different environment.
Yeah.
When
me and you, when our lives collided, with our boys, I remember you being, and I was thinking like, why the heck is he an Auburn fan? There's always those people who have. They didn't even go to school there, but they root for that team.
Yes.
And then I learned that you went to school at Auburn. I was like, okay, I'll give him a pass then that he roots for Auburn. You know? One of the things that me and you've talked about this on some overnight ball tournaments before, but one of the things about the difference between a veterinarian and a people doctor is, like, as far as people go, all of our anatomies are the same. Mm-hmm. Organs are all in the same place. We deal with similar things. Our bodies work the same because we're all human beings. But you treat several different species of animals, so I could see where, organs in dogs are in different places than a cow, or I don't know that much about. I'm not a vet, but the cow's got multiple stomachs and all that kind of stuff. So you got to know all that. That's a lot more stuff to learn.
Yeah.
I guess if you specialize, like I only treat dogs, maybe it'd be more like being an actual doctor, people doctor. But if you treat multiple animals, man.
Well, and that's what, we are mixed animal. We see, people ask, like, what is the strangest thing that you've seen? Because for the most part, as long as it's legal for us to take care of, we will take care of it, whether it be a camel, whether it be, we don't take care of monkeys. We will not see monkeys. Monkeys are tough. But other than that, I have taken care of, who would have ever thought I would have wired a possum's mouth together after it's hit by a car?
Wow.
Right?
Yeah. I'd have just put it down.
Yeah, right. And probably the other people would have backed back over it, but this person didn't.
Yeah.
Skunks that were descented, but they were pet skunks.
Yeah.
Pretty incredible. We had a kangaroo.
Wow, that's cool.
That was at the clinic.
Yeah.
We had like I say, camels, zebras, So again, yes, you're correct where we have multiple things, but I think that's part of what is neat about my world is we can do multiple things. You do similar things over and over. In the human world, it has gotten so specialized that family practice, you can't really do anything outside of talking to the person and treating a cold.
Yeah, and then send them to
a specialist. That's all that they can do now.
It blows my mind.
Yeah, and that's where, like talking to Dad, he got frustrated because like things that he could do that were simple he couldn't do anymore.
Yeah.
So now human medicine has gotten so specialized. And so when I look at it, it's a lot of fun, man. Mm-hmm. Like we get different traumas and different things that come in. Sometimes you don't know like how to get those things together, but we have to make it work.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so we can't just say, "Oh, I'm sending you on to here. I tag out. I'm sending you on to here." We've got to make it work.
That's cool. So you go through vet school. I don't know if you have any more interesting stories about vet school, but after you graduate vet school, did you always know you were going to come back to Mayfield, or did you come right back to Mayfield?
So no. My thought was I'm not married at this point. My thought was I'm going to travel and do a year here, do a year there, right? And so whenever I got out of school, my first job was in Memphis. Went there, had a great time. It was a good experience. But then I was going to say, I want to go to South Carolina.
Yeah.
We're going to go to, and it never panned out because I did get a little homesick.
Right.
And
Gotcha.
so my sisters were back here. My middle sister, she ended up having a baby. And so, like, me missing out on some of the family time really started eating at me.
Gotcha.
So my second year out, so that would have been 2006. I graduated vet school in 2005. 2006, I moved back to Mayfield and started working at the clinic that I'm at now.
Gotcha.
Mm.
That would have been, I was in Afghanistan when you moved back here. So I'm trying to piece our lives, because at one point our lives kind of collided together with our kids and stuff. So I was just trying to piece that together. So you moved back to Mayfield. You start working at the clinic here. That was when it was over by like the tobacco barns.
Correct.
What's that street?
Yeah, West James.
Street. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now y'all have a really beautiful facility right there on the bypass. But so you move back, and then at what point do you go from being bachelor Tim Jones veterinarian to now married man? When did you meet Allison?
So now you put me on the spot of when we got married and all that.
I don't have to know dates. You can just kind of fill in.
It was kind of neat how it happened. She was actually in my sister's. Allison was in my sister's wedding.
Oh, okay.
And so my sister Vanessa ended up doing a little matchmaking my first year out, and at vet school, and I really wasn't ready to settle down.
Yeah.
And my wife, bless her heart, she's amazing and just so caring and compassionate and just kind of helped me. Okay,
Yeah.
Here's what we need to do, and very family oriented and patient. Because I really wasn't looking to find a long term at that point.
Yeah.
When I moved back, so I never said we were dating whenever I was in Memphis. We were just talking. And then when I moved back, we started dating.
Yeah.
But again, she was very good for me. And so we ended up getting married in 2007 because I moved back in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up getting married in 2007. And then from there, in 2007, at that same time, is when I bought into the vet clinic.
Yeah.
So I became a partner. There was 3 of us at that point that were partners in the practice. So in 1 year, I get married and I buy into the Mayfield Veterinary Clinic practice. So that's kind of where it started. But Allison and I, we knew each other.
Yeah.
She'll even tell you she had a crush on me in high school. So I'll bring that out and call her out a little bit.
Yeah.
But at that point, I was too good for her. I was a couple years ahead of her. You know how that works. You know. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm too cool to date the underclassmen.
Right. Yeah, I think she was. Whenever I was a senior, she was a sophomore because my sister was a freshman.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times, even nowadays, with my oldest son, he's a freshman, same age as your son, and he will. I'll say, some of my friends have daughters, and I'm like, hey, what about so? And he'll be like, Dad, she's a 7th grader. I'm like, that's a big deal now, but in 10 years or even in 5 years, 3 years don't mean nothing when it comes to age gap. Because me and my wife, so you and your wife are what, 2 or 3 years, 2 years apart?
Yeah.
So me and my wife are 3 years apart, but she's older. I married the older. She was a cradle robber. Your wife, just quickly on her, and this is a compliment. My wife calls your wife one of those super moms.
Yeah.
And she means it as a compliment.
Yes.
Like Allison seems to just do everything.
Yeah.
And she's like, I can't do all that stuff that Allison does, like super mom,
Yeah.
And she does. She's very, like, all those things you said about her, very compassionate and caring, and she wants everybody to do well, and she supports everything. She's an awesome person.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Our family would not be what it is without her, for sure.
Most of the time, the wives are the glue that holds it all together.
100%.
All together.
Yeah.
So, did you know pretty early on when you started working for the vet clinic that you wanted to be an owner in it, partial owner in it?
Yeah. So this is, I guess, one of the things about the shadow thing we talked about early on.
Yeah.
But even pushing on forward, my personality doesn't work well to work for somebody.
I got you.
Doesn't work well at all. And so even from early on, I was like, I want to own my own practice.
Yeah.
I want to, and I didn't ever know that I would have a partnership, but I wanted to own my own practice. I wanted to make the decisions. I wanted to, be that person that everybody went to. Which has its goods, has its bads. There's definitely a lot that will come with that. But from the start, I knew that I wanted to be an owner.
Yeah, cool. And what did that look like? Did that come with all new responsibilities too?
Oh,
Here's where I'm going with this. You're newly married. You're buying a practice. You're piling that responsibility on pretty heavy at the beginning of the start of your marriage and stuff like that. So with that comes all these extra pressures and responsibilities moving forward. That give you some sleepless nights every now and then?
Oh, absolutely. and it always has. And, what you don't realize during that time is, okay, we've gone from a vet. And in a vet, you take care of the animals, but at the same time, you're still taking care of the people.
Yeah, I was going to get there.
So when we say that, and we can come back around to that, but then also you had that responsibility. But now we've come around to where you have the responsibility of staff.
Yeah.
You have the responsibility of paychecks. You have the responsibility of keeping the practice going. You have just all those things that do come. And as we went I wanted it to be different. So, Chad Badger is my partner, and a phenomenal Christian man, phenomenal partner. Could not ask any more than what God has led me to be with where we're at. I had a vision in which, and he was like, absolutely, let's roll with it.
Yeah.
And I wanted to build a new clinic. I wanted to do the things in which, and that was from an early time. So in 2011, so we'll kind of, I guess, fast forward. So all that responsibility, all that other 2011 is when we bought our other partner out. And that's when we started kind of transitioning some things and kind of getting prepped to build the new clinic. But before then, like you were talking about, the responsibilities of that, kids, and we were talking about Allison, she gets a little bit upset because I think I use all my patience at work, and it runs out at the end. But amazingly, she understands. Right. And kind of the same way with talk is when I'm talking to everybody all day, I get home, like I've used it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Allison, I've used it. And she's ready to tell me about her day. She wants to hear about my day. And again, just phenomenal. But the pressures absolutely were pretty tough.
So you brought it up. Let's go ahead and let's dig in there about marriage, family life, owning a business, the balance. You already scratched the surface, but I want to go a little bit deeper in that because I'm equally, and most men who are listening to this are guilty of this too. Like you said, my talk, I used it all up. I don't have anything left for you. It is so important that we save that kind of stuff for the people that matter the most. Correct. And I'm not saying that your customers or your clientele, patients, I guess you would call them, being in the medical facility, they do matter, but what matters most?
Right.
Where's your for me, I just released a video right before this interview comes out about how I have to cut back on this ministry that I've started because of my life's getting busy, because my first ministry is always to my household. And so your first responsibility, even though you're a business owner, is always to your household. So how do we save some of that? How do we balance those things? Most men and most marriages that fail, let's say if it's the man's fault, most of it comes down to they can't figure out how to balance that work and family life. What's worked for you guys at home?
So, I think us being open, communication, understanding, both of us understanding, and it's not that we're both needy. I think we're completely the opposite. So that's where things could go bad pretty easily because we don't sit and ask from each other. but our relationship is we just kind of know. And so I'll be honest. And when you were saying that, when we talk about family, jobs, life, whenever all that first started, we're leaving out something, right? Okay, so when God's not number one, makes it tough. We went through some challenging times during all that, and the part of, I think, that was a little bit off was God fell about third in that time. Really did. Whenever I think back and I think about, I was so motivated job-wise, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, what's your idol, right?
Yep.
That was probably plugged in number one. And Allison, honestly, this is before kids. She's okay, but that's number two. We're going to get there. We're going to get where we need to be.
Yeah.
So it was, very much all messed up. I'm not saying I have it all right now, but I think at that point in time, I did not see, kind of what they'd say, the forest for the trees type of thing.
You have to get, I'm glad you brought that up and went this way. You have to get that hierarchy right.
Yes.
And then when you do, everything else falls into place. So, so for a family, for a man who has a family, this includes kids, you always have to put God first.
Right.
Above your spouse.
Yep.
I know sometimes that hurts, but you have to. It has to be that way. And then your spouse comes next, not your kids.
Not your kids, correct.
That's also a big. A lot of families get that wrong.
Yep.
Usually, it's more the ladies than the men get that wrong.
Yep.
But it has to be God, and then your spouse, and then your children.
Correct.
And then everybody else. Then your job.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up because that was one of the things early on that, and it's hard to know before you have kids, but Alice and I did talk about, we have to make sure we are strong.
Yep.
We have to because we're no good to our kids if we put them first and we are not strong.
Right.
And so it has always been something in which we have told our kids that, I'm sorry, like your mama means more than you do, type of thing. Just joking, but still pretty serious about it. Is our decisions are going to be made about our spouse, not about what our children want. Showing love and showing comfort to your spouse first, and then going to their children. Now there are times, obviously, we all understand that we have to help and push our kids up, and we got to kind of call a timeout on the spouse thing, but it cannot be number two.
No.
And I think that has been an incredible thing that God has truly worked out as we put him first. But even before I'd say I put him first, he was always in my life. He was always working there. But there was a time that he wasn't number one.
Yeah.
We still had the values of Christian.
Yeah.
We still had the values and thoughts of what we need to do, Allison and I, because Allison, she was not necessarily raised in church. Like her story is a little bit different than mine, and so her growing up was a little bit different. So she was building her faith at the same time that we got married.
Gotcha.
But those are things that we talked about of, we cannot put kids ahead, And I think whenever you were talking about how do we make that balance, so one of the things my father did say that I truly remember that has really stuck with me, he said, don't work your life away, meaning you need to make sure you have enough time for your family.
Yeah.
And he worked a lot, and I'm not making a knock on him whatsoever. I think he did what he needed to do, but his big thing to me is family time. And so from that, I definitely tried to make sure we had family time.
Yeah.
Part of that ended up where you were talking where kind of we collided was coaching. Coaching was an area in which I could get in, especially my son being my first child, being able to spend time with coaching, been able to try to make a difference with coaching. I will not say I'm the best father at home. I try. Again, I've already said my patience is not where it needs to be. My communication is not where it needs to be. But I thought that was one of the places I could communicate with my son and show him. And from that, I think that went well. Obviously, I'm doing stuff at home too.
Right.
But how do I inject in his life and things that's important for him?
Yeah, if you want to be more involved in your children's lives, but you still want them to be active, what better way than to do some coaching and those kind of things? And that way you're a part of that while they're still getting to accomplish the things that they do. You talked about, and we'll get into the coaching in just a second, but you talked about, you're not the most patient at home. You're still not the best communicator. This shirt I'm wearing talks, sanctification. This is where we suck a little bit less every day. That's what we're trying to do. I think even as parents, as spouses, all that is builds. No couple, I don't care how rooted in God and the Bible you are, none of us start off at the starting line getting it all right.
Right.
It's a progression over time. And I feel like sometimes we do ourselves a disservice. Like if a couple was to look at me and my wife and our family, or even you and your wife and your family, and they'd be like, look at the Joneses. It's funny that your name is the Joneses. Keeping up with the Joneses. Right. Like, look at the Joneses. They've got it together. Look at the Copelands. They've got it all together. Well, we haven't always.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
It was a progression of learning and figuring it out and growing and maturing and sanctifying. And then over time, we've figured it out.
Improved. And I still think, and Allison would say the same thing, if there was a camera inside our doors,
oh gosh, yes.
would they really be saying that?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But no, absolutely, because it is such, and now Allison and I, we go back to our faith. We were at that point. And I think age helps with that. I think understanding helps with that. Experiences help with that. But we go back to our faith, and what really ties us together is growing together, no different than growing in our faith and being able to strengthen in our faith. I think marriage does, like you said, it doesn't, I guess you can say it starts out good, starts out easy, simplistic. Whenever you start, you say the vows, we drive off, and first night's great, second night's good, but as things get in the way, how do you work through them and to continue to be stronger and work? I think a lot of people get to a point that they take one step away. One step takes the two steps. The divorce rate that it is now, it did not happen overnight, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a big thing that Allison and I talk about as far as our marriage goes. And as a man, I have to look at as well, what do I do to work? We talked about outworking. That has to go in your marriage as well.
Oh, yes.
Right? And so it is one of those things that you have to continually work on improving yourself and improving your marriage. And sometimes, despite how I don't feel like I am, but sometimes you have to say you're wrong. Very few times that I'm that way. I think I'm 1.5, honestly. But being able to step back and look and, really look at that, because again, the divorce rates and, people say, well, they cheated on here, cheated. Well, that doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
It doesn't happen. Yeah. And to me, it takes two people to get in that situation.
Yeah.
You don't. And I'm not talking about the cheating part. I'm talking about the separation that divides the spouses.
When does it start?
Yeah.
I've always said somebody doesn't just trip and fall and accidentally fall into adultery. It's over time.
Correct.
It has to happen. Yeah. This thought just came to mind as you were talking about a lot of that. We were talking about how marriages and family life and getting it all right just happens over time. One of the ways that I think could improve that and maybe even speed that up, or maybe get you off to the right start and keep you on that path, is like, I talk about discipleship a lot, of how important discipleship is for the individual, but what about even with marriage or the family? Ideally you might get that from your parents or your wife's parents. You might see the example that they've given in an ideal world, but maybe you don't. I can think, I lead a small group on Sunday nights, and I've got several young couples. Like we have one young couple Ben, he got on to me last time because I talk about them a lot and don't ever say their names. So, Ben and Morgan are friends of ours. They're in their 20s. Yeah. They've got 2 young kids. So, in a way, me and my wife, we're like what I would call the next step ahead in our life.
Right.
We're able to disciple them a little bit and pour into them like, hey, we got this wrong at that stage you're in. We kind of got this wrong. It's better to do it this way.
Right.
We have another young couple who are now they're pregnant with their first child. So, I think that's big. That's important too. Did you have that, or do you see yourselves as being maybe that mentor for some other couples, maybe in your family or something like that?
So to say that we had it, yes, we do. I think my mother and father,
they were the good example.
They were the great example. Mm-hmm. My mother's grandparents, I could not think of a better man than my grandfather on my mother's side. He just phenomenal. I mean, that joker was probably 5'2", but he stood 10 foot tall to me.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so I had that example from them and from my parents. Allison did not have that example, but when we got married, she did look to my parents. So that part is good. We are kind of, I guess, we look at ourselves for encouragement. We look at ourselves and inside for things that we need to do right and do the wrong. So I'm not saying that is right, because we don't go looking for help. Right. I guess is what I'm trying to say. We don't go looking to say, can you pick us up? Can you do that? Right or wrong, we kind of try to work things out together. But saying that is the couples in which we do try to help are typically, okay, like you said, in their 30s. Like, I'm 47.
Yeah.
Now kid-wise, like we have similar age kids, but I'm 47. I've had 10 years of doing it in maybe a different area in a different way.
We got kids the same age, but you're a decade ahead of me in life, and so I won't deny. You're one of the guys that I kind of look to because you're in that next step of life, than me. So there are some things that I'm watching Tim Jones of. How could I do that? And follow in that footsteps or whatever that case may be. So I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and I do think this is one of the things I always kind of teach, even to. So I guess maybe off topic a little bit, but you are always an example to somebody. So you were saying that is as a family, as a person, as a man. Whether you know it or not, I talk to the kids big time about this too, is you're an example. People look at you, wrong or right, they're looking.
Yeah.
And so you always have to make sure, that's not why you check yourself, but it should be a reason why, if you are going to be a Christian, a disciple of God, and somebody that you should be looked up to.
Yeah.
You should be different. You should be. So here you go, is what does Jesus, God, call us to do? To be held at a higher standard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when I look back now at 47, and I look back at whenever I was 17, being held at that Jones standard, I kind of understand that.
Yeah. It makes more sense now.
And so when I can tie that back, I'm like, God had a plan. Mm-hmm. God had a plan for that because it was a different standard for me, and he felt like he guided me. It wasn't me. He guided me to become stronger from that, not to take the other route. I did make mistakes. I try to learn from mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think that has helped me. It has helped Allison out in how we do things, because we do feel like we're held at a higher standard. Mm-hmm. I mean, bottom line, if I do something wrong, bad, whatever it may be, and it comes out on social media, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah.
And so there is a standard in which I look at, and I look at myself, that I can't do some of these things, not only because they're not wrong, but you're also going to lead other people astray and say, look what he did. Mm-hmm. Look what he did.
Yeah, you just take it's really not a fair standard because we're all human beings. But let's just, because you're sitting across from me, let's just say you had an immoral, something happened immoral, and it come, like you said, come out on social media the next day or the next hour. Can you guys believe that Tim Jones did this?
Yeah.
Whereas maybe Joe Blow, who nobody knows, does the exact same thing. Nothing's ever said about it.
Yeah.
So is it unfair?
Yeah.
Yes, because you're just as much of a sinner and a fallen man as the rest of us.
100%.
But like you said, people are always watching and being held to that higher standard. That is a calling on your life.
Yeah.
James says, the book of James says, you should not strive to be a teacher because teachers are held to higher standards. And I pray about that all the time because I teach and I lead. I'm an elder in our church. So I know that I'm held to that higher standard, and sometimes I don't feel worthy of that. But at the same time, sometimes because I know of that calling on my life, it makes me make decisions that I wouldn't make.
Correct.
And it keeps me down the path that God would have me to go. You were talking about, not getting into vet school that first year, but now looking back at how it was the best thing. We don't see those things in the moment.
Right.
God is outside of our time, and He's got everything laid out. And in the moment, you're like, well, now what am I going to do?
Yeah. Right.
But now at 47, you're looking back and thinking, man, that was the best thing that happened for me, that I didn't get in that first year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. All right, so you and Allison married, practice is going well, you start having kids, and you start coaching. This is kind of where our lives collide, right? We live in the same elementary school district. And so your son Luke and my son Evan, who are the same age, we held Evan back, so he's a grade behind your son, but they're the same age. Was it basketball or baseball that they started playing together first? I think it was basketball, maybe.
It was basketball. I think.
Yeah. So you started coaching basketball, elementary school basketball, and our sons played on the team together. What did you know a lot about sports, or did you just think, I'm just going to do this and I'll learn as I go?
No, so I know a little bit, probably enough to be dangerous on basketball. Football, I felt like I knew.
Yeah, you played football.
I knew. Yeah. Baseball, I didn't.
Yeah.
I watched. So whenever I started coaching, Danny Sassine, his son plays baseball, and we were wanting to start kind of this loosely travel team, and he was like, "You're going to have to coach." He's like, "If we do this, you're coaching." I'm like, all right, gotcha. So do you know that within a month, I have not studied like that since my first year of vet school?
Really?
So, boy, I went through it.
You took it serious then,
man,
huh?
I went through it, dude, because I don't know baseball. Like, hit, run. I don't really know it well. Mm-hmm. I know it better now. You still don't have the knowledge if you don't play it, but I watched so many videos, I read so many rules, I did so much for baseball. So when we look at the coaching and why did I think I wanted to coach, one is I enjoy kids. I really do. From young to older, one of the reasons why I'm around high school football, one, I love high school football, but it is emotionally about those kids that are in that locker room.
Yeah.
Trying to make a difference on one or two.
Yeah.
You're not going to do it all the time. But again, we look back at, how do we be an example? How do we be a leader? How do we do those? I think it starts on some of these kids that, may not have the right leadership in their life and stuff. And so starting, and honestly, I didn't really know that when I started coaching.
Yeah.
But saying that, that's where I wanted to be a part of my son's life. Mm-hmm. I felt like I had a calling, if you will, to coach. When I started coaching, I saw the opportunity to be in the lives of the kids.
Yeah.
And there's a lot like Evan that have great leadership in their household. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot that do not.
Yeah.
But even the Evans of the world and Lukes of the world still need encouragement from time to time, because honestly, I need somebody to encourage Luke after I get in chewing him, right? And so looking at all that, I just felt like, that was a part in which personally I could add in. As it went on, though, is God is working through me. And so whenever we would do things, whenever like sportsmanship, just things like that, is how do we do this in the right manner? Mm-hmm. Okay. Winning is important.
Yeah.
Winning the wrong way is not.
Right.
you know, if you're going to do something, you always do it right. And then the right means the right way. You know, how can we glorify God in the things that we do? And you may not have the kids understanding that exactly, but how do we be the better person?
Yeah.
You know, and so there will be some people probably that come on your, you know, podcast that say winning is 100% absolutely the most important thing in the world.
Yeah.
Maybe so. But I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think winning in life is what's important. And sometimes you have to have those failures to get better. Sometimes you have to have those losses to get better. And honestly, it's one of those that we have taken, you know, we were decent at football and I think we got better.
Yeah.
Basketball, we were decent, we got better. Baseball, we were horrendous and we got better. Yeah. And so like you take it and you do it the right way and you learn from adversities, you learn from, and again, that's walking down that Christian life that maybe the kids don't understand. Mm-hmm. How do we get better from that loss? How do we get better from, you know, those type of things and do it the right way?
Yeah. So we're called to be, as followers of Jesus, we're called to be disciple-making disciples, mm-hmm. right? I think always in a man's life, he should be getting discipled from somebody, and he should be discipling somebody, always. Right. There's always somebody lesser than you, and there's somebody greater than you that you should be learning from. And I can see where coaching and being around those kids' life, you use different terminology, but you said, hey, I just want to make a difference in maybe a couple of those kids' lives. And that doesn't always look like, now I think at some point it should come, but that doesn't always look like I'm trying to give them the gospel.
Correct.
At some point you have to build a relationship with that young mm-hmm. man. You have to build a relationship with that child, which, like you said, if they don't have good role models in the home, you got to build trust. Yep. And then once you build trust, then that kid starts to open up to you, and then you're able to share more. But the whole time you're still coaching with, and this is what I've seen from you specifically because you've coached my son, you're still coaching with those godly principles in mind, you know, with the sportsmanship, with, you know, giving glory to God while you do that. It still pops up on my my memories every so often, but for the few years that we were coaching the travel baseball team, I say we because I helped a little bit. I was that dad that was just out there yelling and fielding, throwing balls, you know. But, for a while we did the travel thing. Mm-hmm. Now, looking back, I have a whole different opinion about that. We might go down that road a little bit. But I do know, and we didn't do it often, but sometimes we had those long tournaments. Yeah. In the first couple of years, we didn't even make it to Sunday.
Right. That's right.
But, man, those kids are some good ball players now. But anyways, the few times I do remember, we had those Sunday games, we got up and we had a morning devotional, Correct. And you got the boys involved. I remember Luke leading one. I remember some of the other boys leading one. Praying. We let the boys know how important it was to pray. Even to this day, like Sedalia Elementary, our football team prays before and after every practice. So just instilling those principles in those kids as you raise them up, as you coach them up. At the time, they may not even realize the impact it's making. Just like you didn't realize skipping that year of vet school, you didn't even realize the impact it was making at the time. But then give it 10 years, and they'll look back and think, man, I appreciate those men in my life who instilled those things in me. We probably can't even count the number of kids that you've poured into for free, mind you. You don't have any paid coaching positions. No. In fact, it's probably cost you money. I know it's cost me money, and most of the time I'm just the assistant, right? But because you want to make an impact on those kids, you do what's right moving forward. So, that baseball team that you guys started and I was a little bit a part of, man, that first year was rough.
Oh, it's brutal.
I remember having to talk Evan into playing the next year. Because let's just face it, winning feels good.
Yes.
And when you don't ever win, kids are like, I don't
right. This is terrible. Right.
Yeah. But they did excel. Mm-hmm. They got better. The program has built and got better. So looking back and seeing those things, it makes those first couple of years worth it. Yeah. Always.
And you mentioned, the that you had a different thought on some of the Sundays. It seems like every sport now is year-round and every day during the week, and tournaments are on Sunday. And so I agree with you, But when we're put in a world where that is kind of the norm, how do we separate ourselves from the world? And so I can promise you, we made people see God in the things that we did. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the argument that I had on the Sundays, it is what it is, and it is the world. How do we make things better?
Yeah.
Because I had a real conversation with Alson is how do we do this? Because I need to be at church. Mm-hmm. You know, I need God needs to come first, not baseball, right?
Right.
I cannot tell you how many people outside of our Eagles team, mm-hmm. okay, parents and kids and all that, outside watchers come to me and said something.
Yeah.
There were multiple times we had people crying, watching our devotionals and listening to our prayers, coming to saying, I wish my son could have been a part of this, coming and saying, I needed that today.
Yeah.
Coming in, I mean, over and over. So these people would not have heard the gospel that morning.
True.
If we would not have been there.
Yeah.
And so I do think if you put him first, God is not held in a box, right?
Yeah. We like to put him there.
We like to put him there because this
right.
is what we should do and how things, but God can work if you allow him. And do I think it's right having those tournaments on Sunday? I will agree with you. I don't think it is. Do I think it's wrong missing church? I do.
Yeah.
But are there times that you can make a difference in people's life if you continue to put him first? And we're saying we're not 100% wrong, so we're just going to ignore everything on Sunday.
Yeah.
Next Sunday we'll get back around to it.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's a part that if you continue to put him first, you know, there's been times that, you know, I feel like you need to go in the middle of the week to church. Now, is that Wednesday? Is it Tuesday? It's kind of Wednesday for us, right? That's what we have set up. Everybody kind of does.
It's just the norm.
It's just kind of what it is.
Yeah.
But I think that midweek gathering of the saints and the Christians is hugely important. So when you miss that, what are you doing? You know, well, can you have that gathering of saints if you're with other people too?
Yeah.
I think you can.
So to me, I land somewhere in the middle on this because I see the side that you said.
Yeah.
I think the gathering of the saints is important, not so much of what we consider the Sunday morning service, as much as community, hearing from God, getting poured into, because the world will drain us over time. You need a way to get filled back up, whether that's your own private, personal time with God, or hearing a sermon from your pastor, or you know, a lot of churches are getting away from a Wednesday night and a Sunday night service to go to like the small groups or the life groups. I lead two of them, I know, and they're very important. Like I get as much from those as hopefully the people who come to hear me teach. So I do think it's a balance. I see exactly what you're saying. Now, to the family that spends all summer long, every weekend going to ballparks, you are doing your family a disservice.
Absolutely.
You are absolutely. Now,
let me interrupt. I do want to say this.
Okay,
so keep that in mind.
All right.
Is we made sure our tournaments were not every single weekend.
We did, yes.
Right. We did not drain our family because that was one thing I was not going to do. Mm-hmm. We were not going to drain our family from financially, but then spiritually, emotionally. I think a lot of things have gone astray. So saying that, there might be some months that we had 3 tournaments, but that was very few, and most times it was 2.
Yeah, most time we kept it at 2.
Most times it was 2.
Mm-hmm.
And so where we would try to hold that balance of it's not every weekend. So I just wanted to put that out there for our Eagles team.
We did not
we did not do that every and I think all of them appreciate that and appreciate the faith-based type of thing that we had going on with all that. You know?
So I guess where I'm going with this is there's a balance, and we can't get into one ditch or the other. Okay, we can't say that if you miss any Sundays, you know, you're doing you're terrible sinner, you're bound for hell, all these kind of things. People get sometimes too far into that ditch because we were able to be a light at those tournaments. So, like I said, the family who all summer long, every weekend, you're going to tournaments. You never, we'll catch you back in the fall when baseball's over or whatever your sport is. Sometimes it's football or 7-on-7s. You're doing your family a disservice. But if you're plugged into community, maybe you're going to small groups a night throughout the week. Your kids are involved in youth ministry. You're plugged into community, whatever that looks like. And I do think Sunday mornings are important, the gathering of the saints. I think that's very important. But I also, like you said, maybe you are the only light that some people will see at that ballpark because they're not believers. And you have a morning devotional, and that coach is preaching the gospel to his boys and some other teams over here. Do I think that that's important? Absolutely. So maybe your travel team, I love the way you set it up in the beginning. We did have a couple busy months, but maybe you just do one tournament a month. Do I think that's okay to miss church for that one tournament if you're being the light of Christ? Absolutely. Because we are called to be separate, but we're still in the world.
100%. Correct.
So
who did Jesus sit with?
Yeah, the tax collectors, the sinners, the drunkards.
Absolutely.
But didn't join in with them.
Did not. No. He sat with
them, and he gave them the gospel. Yeah, that's a you have to distinguish that, because some people are like, go to the bar and they're like, I'm doing what Jesus did. Well, Jesus didn't take 11 shots while he was there. He was giving
he wasn't pounding beers while he was there. So
looking back now, I don't think by any means am I saying being a part of the Eagles program was a bad thing. I think it was great for my son, but I just have a different preference on it now. I was afraid, and this is where I'm going with this, where I have different thoughts on that. I was afraid my son was going to miss out on something if he wasn't a part of and I'm throwing up quotes for those who are listening, the travel team. Now I know looking back that's silly. The chances of both of my boys are like, we're playing in the NFL, and I hope you do. Because I know my boys would be a light to Christ in that area. But realistically, if we're thinking about it, less than 1% are the chances that my boys get there. So what's more important? Having them putting God first is more important. So I was afraid, like if my son's not on, my first boy, if my son's not on a travel team, he's missing out on life, which I know now that's silly. But.
Or he's going to get behind. I'm not keeping him where he needs to be. No, it's not. But, coming back around on the coaching and just, thinking about that, because I don't coach anymore. My daughters, I don't know anything about soccer and less about women and girls. So with that being said, I feel like my light probably would not shine in the realm of soccer and coaching that. My youngest daughter, she does a little bit of volleyball, but whenever I look back at the coaching and again how I tried to do it, like you said, it wasn't, I don't think you can force people to drink water, right? I don't think we can force people to believe Christ. But if I can have one kid to look back down the road and say, what was he doing? He was a little different. I would like to go back and talk to him. Or, this is how we did it then. Maybe it's a good way to do it there. And trying to show Christ in actions, and a lot of times, like you said, without the kids knowing that's what we're doing, then we tie back around and saying, well, guess what? This is why we're doing it. This is why we knock somebody down on the football field. We can help them up. Now, if you made a good play, it's even better that you help them up. But at the same time, we can be the light. We can be the difference. And, it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
That gospel message makes more sense to that young man when he's seen you live it out first.
Correct.
That's to me. I'm all for we should always be giving them the gospel, but when they can see it lived out in our lives, it makes more sense to them.
I mean, what makes more sense, when you see somebody or when you hear somebody? If
the impact is probably greater seeing them.
Yes, absolutely. And when you look, you see this a lot of, faith first. But then you say them out coaching, and they're ripping them with, cuss words and this and that. Like, there's nothing wrong with getting on to that kid and yelling at that kid and directing. But when it's done in a fashion, okay, how does that hit the kid?
Yeah.
Well, what's faith when, you're sitting there drilling me with cuss words?
Yeah.
What's faith when you can't handle me or talk to me in a respectful way?
Yeah.
And so I do think actions always speak louder than words. You can say I love you all day long, but have you showed?
Yeah.
So
now your life is kind of transitioned to, you've got 2 high schoolers, right?
Correct.
And what's your youngest?
6th grade.
6th grade.
Yeah.
So you've got 2 high schoolers, and you, like you said, you don't coach your daughters anymore.
Correct.
I don't really. I've transitioned from all of that coaching. My coaching has went from sports to now life and Bible is what I coach and teach now. But you are still heavily a part of the Graves County High School football team.
Correct.
You're usually on the sideline every time. You call yourself a glorified water boy.
Right, absolutely.
What do they have a role for you? What is your role there?
No. I just help.
You just help. Just love helping?
That's right. So I get to pull the trailer that carries all of our stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But it gives me a great parking spot.
Ah, gotcha.
So I get to park
you're right there on the
it.
sideline.
So for everything, it is great for that parking spot.
That's good. We have a lot of great men and dads that support our high school team. Jeremy Woodward comes to mind. Not only does he support that program, he's at every game because he's kind of the trainer. He's a physical therapist, so he's there to help. Monetarily, man, he pours so much money into that program because he loves those kids, cares for them. He has 2 boys that play on the team too. But still, I just see the whole 12th man group is all, and I'd love to have every one of those guys. I'm hoping you'll lead the way for some of those guys, soften them up a little bit. But every one of those men are, most of them, from what I know of them, are God-fearing, faith-believing men who just want to pour back into that next generation every year. Kevin, Jared, Jeremy, you. I'm sure I'm missing some. Those are the ones I know. But that whole 12th man was all started to how can we pour into kids more.
Correct.
And football is the conduit that we use. But man, what you're teaching them, the principles, the morality, even though we're not saying. And I'm not in the huddle, so I don't know what's being said. But even though you're not saying Christ, you're showing Christ through what you do. And then when that gospel message or when that time does come around that you can have that talk with that kid, they're like, oh, I've seen you live that out.
Correct.
It's cool. I love seeing it. I won't mention the young man's name, but he'll know when he hears this. You've made such a large impact on some kids that this young man was asked, if you could be alone with one person on a deserted island, who would it be? And he said, oh, that's easy, Tim Jones. And you're not his dad, you're not anything. You're just someone who coached him growing up. And to have that kind of impact, you should be proud of that. Is I guess what I'm saying. So I appreciate what you've done for my son. You've coached him in many different things. Football, basketball, baseball. Now, our boys have they both still play football, but your son plays baseball too. Nope. He's done with that
He's
too?
Done with that too.
Football
He's
only?
Football only.
Oh.
Yeah, football only.
Man, I thought he still played baseball.
Nope.
And so Evan still plays basketball a little bit, but he's done with the baseball too. So what's next for the Jones family moving forward?
Ooh, I don't know, man. The clinic is as big and as bad as it's ever been.
Yeah.
And I go back to with part of that as far as the vet part and where we're at there is that, man, God is good.
Mm-hmm.
He's really good. We have been blessed beyond belief, and so if you drive up, all glory to God. We have scripture, at work. Again, I told you a little bit early on that being kind of an owner is kind of like coaching. Okay, so we have a team of about 50 now.
On staff?
Employees on staff.
Yeah.
And with that you have some that are skilled here, skilled there. You've got to find your where they fit in, and you have to kind of put them in those situations. You also have to be the pepper up.
Yep.
You've got to be able to take care of the issues, the problems. You have to have the respect and the love for all of the employees from top to bottom. There's nobody that is better. There's nobody that is worse. Doesn't matter on the job. It takes everybody to make it work. We know that in sports it takes everybody, even the people that are practicing that aren't playing on whatever night it may be or day it may be.
Right.
That practice makes the other ones better. So in all that, we look at that, and I come back around. We started this several years ago, to where every morning we start with prayer. Okay, and it's one of those to help us through the day, to get us through. Now we're at a point that during the day when things aren't going exactly right, they're saying, "Hey guys,
let's stop.
We need a prayer. We need a prayer."
Yeah.
And so not only is it Dr. Badger and I looking to, bring Christ in there, but then the other ones are feeling comfortable with that. Does that mean we're perfect? Does that mean everybody in there is perfect? It doesn't. Yeah. No, but it does mean that there's values in which we hold. There's a standard in which we hold, and we hope that that's visible to outside people.
Yeah.
We know it's visible behind the scenes.
Yeah.
We want it visible in front of the scenes as well. But there's a standard in which we hold, and our standard comes from the guidelines of the Word.
Yeah.
And again, whether our employees know that I'm professing Christ during that time, or I'm having you do this because of this is what the Bible says we should do, they come back around and say, yeah, okay.
I'm going to bring this up. We kind of started to go down this road, and then we ended up on the coaching path. But with you and your practice, you're a vet. You treat animals, but attached to every one of those animals is a human being.
Correct.
So you have a large opportunity come through your doors every day to be that light and to be that person, to be that disciple, making disciple, to share Christ. Maybe even share the gospel. How many have you ever had the opportunity to pray with the owners? I'm sure that's because nowadays people's pets, a lot of them are like kids to these people. So
correct.
I wasn't raised that way. Right. I don't understand that, but some people do.
So no, I wouldn't be where I'm at if I did not understand what those people are doing. Now, I will be the first to tell you, an animal life is not the same as a human life.
Exactly.
Some people do get confused with that.
Yeah.
I'll be the first to tell you, but I also understand what these pets mean to these people.
Yeah.
And you talk about the opportunity that I have to talk to people in the exam rooms. And this is not to pat anything on the back, but the opportunity to share Christ and to talk to people and just to open up and have people open up, I get that a lot, a whole lot. From whether it's a widow who has just lost her husband who's going through X, Y, and Z and just needs a hug and a prayer.
Yeah.
And I'll pray for you. Whether it's somebody that is younger that's never been through loss and they're having to put their animal down, a hug, a love, a word of encouragement, things like that. Hearing, one of I was kind of brought to a little more light when I had to make a major decision year and a half ago or so. I was in a conversation on busy Saturday morning. Busy. And I stayed in there talking to him for probably 45 minutes of where we should be as far as men and fathers, of how a father will be judged differently on how he directs his family.
Yeah.
We had a huge conversation about that. But, man, I'm telling you, the strength in which I have gotten from people just talking to, and it's people going through things.
Yeah.
There's this one lady whose husband was bedridden for years, and she didn't have a lot of extra help. She'd come bring her dog in. We would see what's wrong with it, not much, but then we'd talk. this older lady is mowing a yard. She's moving her husband. And again, all that. And I'm like, you are an encouragement to me.
Mm-hmm.
And she would start crying. But she was.
Yeah.
And so we would have prayer to hopefully help strengthen her.
Yeah.
Again, I cannot tell you how, one, God has given me the ability to talk to these people in kind of a private setting in the exam room.
Yeah.
To the point in which it encourages me that much more of just hearing from other people. So amazing.
I think people don't realize that the impact they can make, and we've already talked about this, but God has a plan for your life. So yes, you're an animal doctor and you're working on their animals, but he's giving you the opportunity to counsel and pour in and just be a shoulder to cry on.
Just
sometimes
be there.
to be.
Just be there.
A lot of times people just need somebody to talk to.
Yeah.
And all that could take for you is just, what are you going through?
Yeah.
I'm sorry this has happened.
Yeah.
Can I give you a hug? Can I pray for you? Can all those
and sometimes if we would just ask, because you have people that are in a bad mood that are going, whatever it may be, get in the room and hey, how's it going? Like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on? And they open up, and you're like, I'd be upset too if I had this stuff going on.
Yeah.
And it is amazing if you will just ask people, and this is not even being rude. Like, they can be in there just a normal, everyday, just, okay, we're going to get shots or vaccines, and we're leaving. How's things going? And then they're like, okay.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're in an hour conversation.
Yeah. Sometimes for me, I'll hit them with the "How are you doing?"
Yeah.
And they're like, they give you that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's good.
Yeah,
Everything's
good.
fine. And I say, no, but no, really, how are you doing?
Yeah. I'm really asking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, since you asked, and a lot of times it's, they just, because nobody cares maybe, or they don't have anybody they can, or this is one of the reasons I started this podcast for men is a lot of times men feel like they have to carry it all.
Yep.
And maybe they don't have that corner toter or that battle buddy or that person that they can talk to. And then just like me and you talking, another man asks you, "No, man, but really, how are you doing?" And then they get to dump all that weight they've been carrying off.
Yep.
And then all you were there to do is just check on their new puppy they bought.
Yes, right. Oh, yes, yeah.
And it turns into that 45-minute conversation like you talked about. So that's just crazy how those God's plan and how he puts you in those. And so I guess what I'm saying is don't discount where you are in life and think, well, God, I don't work in ministry, so God can't use me.
Yep.
Well, you're a vet,
Yep.
and God uses you every day.
Every day.
If you're a UPS driver, you give that package, God can use you there. Every day you can.
And that's what it talks about is what God gives talents. Mm-hmm. Everybody's talents are not the same. Right. We all do not get the same amount. But if you will allow him, you can use the talents that you have been given, whether you're talking about talents, which are physical, or talents in the money.
Yeah.
But I truly believe we are blessed with talents in certain ways, figuring it out and allowing God to work. You guys are amazing. Y'all can lead singing. You can sing. You can play instruments. You can read music. Mm-hmm. Man, like if I tried to do that, it'd be a great comedy show.
Yeah, right.
I can't do that.
Yeah.
But, can I talk to people and can I allow people to kind of, cry on my shoulder, whether it is from things they're going through life or talking about their animals? Because, again, I know a lot that get very close. I have had people in which you would look at and say, there's no way they would care about an animal. Mm-hmm. And you don't think they're the first one crying in the room.
They're boohooing in the room.
And it's not there to call them out. It's just there that sometimes that emotional attachment is a little bit more than what we understand and recognize. Mm-hmm. To the point of, you look at, the link between a lost loved one and that animal to them. It's more because it's that link and that connection. Yeah. So sometimes when we're making a decision, to put an animal down,
it's deeper than that.
It's deeper than that. And so when we get on that and we talk, there has to be a certain level of trust in which I have with all my clients to trust me to be able to do what's right, but then also to trust me, period, right? And so I think, again, God has given me that talent. I've been able to do that. And, maybe to be able to stay in business. Our business has grown. Again, I have a fabulous partner. It is not me. It is God working through me, through us. We have 50 employees now.
Yeah.
I mean, and so just the impact of the number of people coming in that reads verses that are on our buildings to the people we can touch and have contact with, to the employees in which we can help families and we can give them, financial ability to do X, Y, and Z and be able to maybe make a difference in those families' lives. God is amazing. Like I said, for me to say this, this is not what I've done. We're definitely in a different place than where we were. You talked about our building on West James Street that had 3 exam rooms, and honestly, you couldn't do much of anything. To a point which we are triple the size, financially probably 8 times. That is God. That's God.
And being a willing vessel to allow Him to work.
To allow Him to work, and community. You talk about community. I mean, community is hugely important. Hugely important, and it is so important for me to be a positive influence to the community, to give back to what has given to me, to just be able to do that, I think is amazing. And again, would I have seen this 30 years ago at 17 as I was,
trying to figure
a captain on the football team? No.
Yeah.
No. Or being able to go through things that are frustrating. And again, I have had a very good upbringing. I have had incredible encouragement, incredible guidance, but allowing that stuff to work in your life takes part too. So again, from where we were to where we are now, it's just amazing,
So you mentioned the parable of the talent that Jesus speaks, and you were talking about talents. Now, talent in that particular instance, he's talking about money.
Financial,
I love that he uses the word talent, because then I think of what talents God gives us. I think the hero of that parable is the man who was given 2 talents, right? So you have one that was given 5, one that was given 2, and one that was given 1. That just goes to show you that God's not a socialist. He's all about
he's a
capitalist, right? But the man with 5, he goes and he invests. He makes 5 more. The man with 2 doubles it, and the man with 1, he's afraid, fear. But the man with 2 talents, he doesn't compare himself with the man with 5. Right. He doesn't say, well, he has 5. What can I do? He's obedient, and he's responsible with what God gives him, or what the master gives him, and then he takes that and he does what he can with those 2, and he brings back 2.
Yep.
So the one with 5, he comes back with 5 more, so he comes back with 10. What does the master say? Well done, my good and faithful servant. Right? The guy with 2, he comes back with 2 more. He doubles his 2, but he doesn't say, how come you don't have 10? He says, well done, my good and faithful servant. So the hero of that story, the man, is the man with 2 talents. Because he takes what God gives him. And that he's because we're not all the same. We're not all capable of handling. If you were to say today, hey Brad, I'm going to step down, I'm going to give you my practice, I would run that thing in the ground. One, because I'm not a vet. I don't have that talent. I don't, so there are things that I can't do. God is aware that I can't handle that. Here's what you can handle. People may look at me and think, man, all the things you juggle, there's no way I could do it. God's not asking you to do that. He's asking you to stay in the lane that you're in. So take what God gives you. This message made a huge impact on my life, and I hope to have this guy on the podcast one of these days. But he's a pastor and evangelist from Texas, and he came here and he preached a message on Shamgar. Do you know who Shamgar is in the Bible?
I would have to go back. Like it rings a bell, but I would have to go back.
There's one verse in the Bible about him. I can't even tell you what verse it is.
No.
I just know who he is. But in the Bible, there was Shamgar.
Yeah.
And Shamgar killed 600 Philistines with basically a cattle prod. And his whole message was, do what you can with what you have.
Yep.
And that's what Shamgar did,
Yep.
and that was his claim to fame in the Bible. He did what he could with what he had, which was a cattle prod.
Yep.
And man, that message has made a huge impact on my life, and that's what I look at now. What do I have, and what can I do with what has God entrusted to me, and what can I do with it? And I see the same with you in your practice. This is what God's given me. What can I do for His glory with it?
And I think that's so important. You don't look around. You don't look around. You don't look in front of you. You don't look behind. You look at you.
Yep.
You know, what can you do to make things better? You know, he didn't look at the 5 and was jealous.
Right.
He didn't look at the 1 and say, I'm better.
Yeah.
He looked at you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we also get carried in a position where we start thinking, well, I'm not as bad as that person.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I'm doing pretty good because I'm not as bad. Or I can't do what they're doing, so why would I even try?
Yeah.
And I think the comparison thing is we will get in trouble. Is like you said, you stay in your lane. You have to make yourself better. You have to do what you can do. And that's one of the things like I do talk to the clinic about. I have talked to different teams about is we have to do what we do, and we have to do it to the best of our ability, not worry about what other things are going on. We don't worry about what other vet clinics are doing. We don't worry about what other people are saying. We do what we do. We do it to the best of our ability, and we keep going.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's good. I just want to take the opportunity and say thanks for watching At the Ready up to this point. If you like the content that we have to share, just take the time to like, share, subscribe. Go and leave us a positive 5-star review on wherever you're watching this. Apple Podcasts is a big one. So we can just spread the word of At the Ready and continue to reach more people with our content. So thank you so much for supporting the show and watching. Now let's get back to the show. Okay, back from the break.
Yes.
We couldn't hold it.
Whoa, man. I'm a lot better now.
So we were kind of wrapping up anyways, but and we talked a little bit while we were on break, but just the importance of I feel like land this plane is just the importance of I feel like we got to go with Shamgar doing what you can with what you have, you know. And what does that look like? It's going to be different for everybody.
Absolutely. And that's where I cannot express enough on God gives everybody a different path, right? He gives everybody different situations. It's not all going to be easy. It's not all going to be good.
Yeah.
It will end up being good. As we're going through the things, though, sometimes we question, and I think it's okay to talk to God and ask, why am I going through? What do I need to see? Things like that.
Yeah.
But again, where I'm at now at 47, from where I was at 37, from where I was at 27 and 17, is God plays more of a part of my life now. And I don't think it's because I'm getting closer to death, right? I don't think it's that.
Yeah.
I think I can actually see. You know, my eyes have kind of been opened up to the experience that I've had that have been God-given, God-led, God-driven type of things that have allowed me to be the person I am, to be the father I am, to be the husband I am, and ultimately to be the Christian I am, and all of which I feel like I have not done a good enough job. And I think part of that is I'm happy with the job I'm doing.
Yeah.
But it's not good enough.
Yeah.
But that's probably my personality where I think if you're not going up, you can't be level, you're going down. So I always look on areas to improve and try to improve. And, you know, I would take, you know, probably anything like our Christian walk is that, you know, we are saved. We are saved, you know, once you accept, you're saved. And at that point, you have God's grace, God's mercy. There's nothing we can do to save ourselves, right?
Right.
I think there are ways in which we can fall from that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest thing is, how do we continue to grow? Some people grow faster, some people grow slower.
Yep.
How do we make our Christian walk better? And I do try to implement that, no different than what I did with my team, no different than what I work, my family, but inside myself. I said initially, there's nobody harder on me than me.
Right.
So as a Christian, sometimes I find it hard to accept what I'm doing is good enough,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I keep telling myself there's nothing that I can do that would ever be good enough
Right.
for what Christ did for us. Am I ever doing enough? So, what you're doing now, I haven't had a chance to tell you, but the respect I have with all the stuff that you're doing, faith-based,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to push that much time into that, sometimes I feel inadequate because I'm not doing more of a service at church.
Yeah.
Or I'm not doing more. But then I look back and I'm like, well, do you know that I just spent an hour talking to this person that come back around was about faith?
Yeah.
You know?
So it's crazy that you said that. You look at me and think, man, the stuff that Brad's
Yeah.
doing, thank you, by the
Yeah.
way, for that compliment. But you're like, I should be doing more of
Yeah.
that stuff. But then there are times in my life where I look at you
Yeah.
and I think I should be doing more of
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
Some of the things that you do one-on-one with those with those young men on the football
Yeah.
team, and because I know you, I know you're pouring into
Yeah.
those boys. So once again, different calling for different
Yes.
people's lives.
Absolutely.
We can't be too hard on
Yeah.
ourselves,
Right.
Because he didn't give you
Yep.
he didn't give you the same talents he gave me.
Correct.
So
Correct.
for you to sit down and do this
Yep.
might not be great
Yep.
because it wouldn't be your calling.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. It would be terrible, man.
But what you're doing on the football field, I might
Yeah.
not be able to do either. So
Yeah.
that's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
we can't be too hard on
Right,
ourselves.
right.
Uh,
But we should always strive to get better.
Absolutely. We should be
Right.
obedient in our calling always.
Yeah.
And we should always be sanctifying. We should be striving for holiness. I know people get a little bit bent out of that shape. When I'll tell people, you should be striving for holiness every day. And
Yeah.
they're like, well, I can't be holy.
Yeah.
Holy just means to be set apart.
Correct.
We're all called to be set
Correct.
apart
Correct.
from the world and what it looks like.
And I don't know that it's enough just to ride through life as a Christian.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Right. And so that's where I think that sometimes it is tough. And I would like to tell the people that we're talking to
Mm-hmm.
is I think all of us at times have that, where we are kind of down and kind of, poor pitiful me,
Mhm.
maybe. I don't know
Or we want
how
to coast.
how to explain
Yeah.
it, but we are good enough for God.
Absolutely.
Right? Or he wouldn't have done what he did for us. And I just think that, I don't know, for me speaking, that there are times that I do feel inadequate
Mhm.
about anything that I've done. But when you look back, and how can you feel inadequate when God has given you those gifts?
Yep.
It says, how do you fulfill those gifts that he's given you? And I think, again, we talk about the talents, is what happens to the one with one if he doubles it to two? We talked about that.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Same thing. Well done.
Well done.
Yeah.
Good and faithful servant.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. If he wouldn't have lived in fear,
Yep.
if he would have just done what he could with what he had, it
Yep.
was just the one. If he'd
Just
have doubled
one.
it and brought back
Yep.
two, that's less than the other
Yep.
two guys. But his response, we know from the other two examples, would have been, well done, my
Yep.
good and faithful servant.
Yep. And you look at that probably to that person with one, it would have been harder on them than the person with five. He has more to lose, right?
Mhm.
He only has one. What
Yeah.
happened to the lady that gave all
Yeah.
in the collection,
Mhm.
right? What did he say about her? She gave
She
more
gave more.
than anybody else, and she gave, one denarii
Yeah.
that she gave?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. She gave more than the Pharisee who dropped. He dropped several coins
Yep.
in the plate because he gave out of his abundance,
Yep.
out of his overflow, whereas she gave all
Yeah.
she had.
All she had.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see that play out. He's rattling it, dropping it, letting
Yeah.
people hear it, look at me, whereas she was like, this all I have, and just kind of slipping it in,
Mm-hmm.
right? But yet she gave more. Yeah,
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah.
All right, Tim, you got anything else?
I'm good, man. No, I do appreciate you
Thank you.
I appreciate what you're doing here, and I appreciate you having me on here.
Yeah.
For certain. I was a little nervous when you at first asked. I'm like, oh my goodness, like I don't really have a story.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you having me on here.
Well,
really do.
Well, what I want people to understand is you do have a story.
Yeah.
It's not this big dramatic. It is dramatic.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
It is a good story,
Yeah.
but a lot of times we look at ourselves and think, well, I don't really have a
Yeah.
story. You know, I didn't know. I wasn't a drug addict. I didn't do all these things. I don't have a story. No, you do, and it's a good story. It's a story of God working through your life and you being obedient. That is the best story.
Yep.
And sometimes we diminish those,
Yes.
and that's not what I want it to be. I want to raise those stories up.
Right.
Some people, tell me all the time, I want to have them on the podcast, or somebody asks them to speak. Well, I don't have much of a testimony. Are you a follower of Jesus? Yes. Yeah. Has he worked through your life? Yes. Then you have a testimony.
Absolutely.
And it's important, and it speaks to somebody.
Right.
I never used to identify with the prodigal son story because I wasn't the prodigal son.
Right.
I wasn't the one who ran off and did all the crazy things and then come back. And I was
the one that was mad.
I was
on
the older
cat,
brother.
Right?
That's right.
On the fat cat
I was the older brother.
Yep.
And I never heard that sermon preached from the perspective of the older brother until I was in my 30s, and a guest speaker came, and he preached the prodigal son story from the position of the older brother, and right then it spoke to me. I was like, I'm the older brother.
Yeah.
And so, there may be people listening to this who they don't relate to, well, I was the drug addict and then God found me, or I did this and I did that. Maybe you were just the person who grew up in church and chugged along, and over time of being faithful and studying your word, one night you had an encounter with Jesus, and then you were obedient and you followed him. That's a good story.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a great story.
But like you said, we don't think about it as being this. Yeah. But it when you look on somebody like that, is it harder to stay like that? Or is it harder for the person that never had it to get it? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do think there's pull and tear of being able to stay strong, and this is no credit to me. That's not what I'm saying. But the people that were born in it, that has had it, and I say born in that you're not. But you understand what I'm saying.
I get where you're going.
Is that's not ezy.
Mm-hmm.
That's not easy. It's not easy to trust God the entire time.
Right.
It's not. We want to say it is.
Mm-hmm.
But when things aren't going your way, it's sometimes not easy.
Yeah. Yeah, we're all faced with decisions in areas of our life. Do I trust God with this, or do I do it under my own strength? Do I go this way or do I go that way? And sometimes it's just down to a simple, do I go left or do I go right? And one way is towards God and putting faith in Him and His glory, and the other way is, toward the world or in your own strength. Yeah. And so not easy, but not necessary.
Easy. And, the other, this is, I guess, kind of random, but it's what you're talking about is, we look at God's will, of His will and what He wants, and we're not puppets, right? God does have a will, and God does expect us to do different things, and His will sometimes doesn't necessarily align with our will. But to me, I think His will is that the things in which we do, if we are God-led people, we make sure He's the light of that decision, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And that whether it goes good or goes bad, He's the light of that decision. And I think that is God's will, is that no matter what happens, we put Him first.
Right.
It's not God's will as we're a puppet, right?
Yeah.
And He's going to do what He has willed to be done. And His will is done.
Yeah,
and don't get me wrong on that, but I think His will a lot of times is you have free choice, man.
Yeah.
I will allow you to go down either one of those roads.
Yeah.
But after you go down either one of those roads, I need you to glorify me.
Yeah. Are you seeking me in that?
Are you seeking me in the decisions in which you're going through? And sometimes I guess this is my chance to, kind of get on that soapbox of God's will. God's will is you put Him first. It's not you're His puppet. Okay, if you go down the wrong road, you see it, you repent, you say, I put you first, guess what? We learn from bad decisions.
Mm-hmm.
We learn from things that don't go right. We learn from, we gain strength in adversities,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so, I think God's will sometimes is, hey, it's going to be easy. You have put me first. It's going to go great.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you might say, God has led me to pick this job, and it didn't go good. You got fired, or the company went kaput, or whatever.
Yeah.
God's will is, do you still glorify Him in all things?
Yeah. Even
That's
if.
His will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I preached a message just a couple weeks ago about having the even if faith.
Yeah.
Right. Putting God first,
Yeah.
even if, I feel like God's
Yeah.
called me into this direction,
Yeah.
and then maybe it does flop.
Yeah.
Do you still glorify Him
Yeah.
even if it went
Yeah.
bad?
Yeah.
That's big.
Yeah.
I love that. All right. Well, I think
We'll end on that.
I think
right?
we'll end on that. That's a great way to end. That's a great way to end. All right. You want to pray us out?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Dear God, we come before you today just thanking you for your power. We thank you for your mercy. We thank you for your grace. We thank you for your love, dear God. I thank you for the opportunity that I've had today to just share my testimony. We thank you for Brad and the things that he is doing in your word to glorify you, to bring this podcast on. And we just pray that you would give him encouragement to continue this, that you would just bless him with different people and be able to bless the people that are listening to this, that they may be able to grow stronger in the things that they hear. Or to come to you, period. Dear God, we pray that you would be with me as I continue my fight through life, that the burdens in which I bear, that you'll make things easier, that you will give me your peace. Dear God, there's so many in this audience that is listening. There's so many people around that dealing with different things, and we just pray that your peace be on them, your guidance be on them, that we would look to you for the decisions that we have to make, dear God, that we would be able to have your light shine through all things, as we talked about, your will be done, that in all things that we glorify you, that we put you first. Dear God, we thank you so much for Christ. We thank you for the opportunity that we have through his blood, that we can live with you one day. We thank you for his love and that sacrifice. We thank you for just his perfect example that he had, dear God. We thank you so much for Christ, and it's in his name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. Tim, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah.
Until next time, stay ready.
Yeah.